Thanks. I'll stand if I may. Firstly, a disclaimer. I'm certainly not behind any of these things. I'm one foot soldier in many of those battles for rights. And I'm not although I'm very often a usual suspect in most rooms that I am in, but in this room I'm not. I'm an exception actually. And I'm probably the least digitally literate person in amongst all those who gave the introduction. And maybe that's an advantage because at least the offline part of it I can comment on. And that will be my attempt. I also want to make a disclaimer that many of the comments that we made, it wasn't just me, it was many other people. Actually, later we didn't find in the report. So obviously they weren't there or they didn't make sense. So I'll use this opportunity again to try and put it forward. But I would like to say that I think some of those comments should somewhere later on come as they are, whether people like them or accept them or not. And they're from a somewhat different perspective, and I'll try and explain that. Firstly, I think just the term freedom of expression, from our experience, and I'll speak from the experience of the right to information movement in India. Right to information across the world, its perspective has changed after the Indian experience. And freedom of expression and the connections between right to information and the freedom of expression are inherent all over. But in India, since the right to information started getting accessed, if you look at it within the Indian constitutional framework, but you can even look at it at the UN, through the UN framework, it was not just, let's say, Article 19(1)(a) of freedom of expression, but it connected, right to information connected actually with the right to life under Article 21. And it's the Indian experience and context that showed it. And it connected with the right to equality under Article 14. So when we talk about internet rights, we need to look at equality issues very strongly. And we need to look at right to life issues very strongly because the internet has become such an important platform of being able to transmit all other rights, just as the right to information and freedom of expression is an extremely important platform. So I want to make 5 points. The first is just this, and this is something that the courts have also acknowledged in India, that actually India's right to information recently, after the right to information law came in the Supreme Court, the Delhi High Court judgment on the Supreme Court judges' asset disclosure, that it is not just Article 19, but also Article 14 and 21. And I think that's something that's alluded to when we are talking about limited access, restricting expression. But I don't think we are looking at power relationships that exist within countries like India enough in this report. The second is that digital has become such an obsessive term equivalent with technology. Somehow all other forms of technology for transmitting either information or communication are being more and more ignored. And again, from the Indian experience, because it's said that there are 5 to 8 million RTI users in India, actually very few of them use the digital platform. And they are face-to-face offline confronting power day in and day out. And that's why about 50 RTI users have been killed over these last few years, and thousands more are threatened every day. And certainly thousands have been attacked in different ways. And I personally know how many calls one gets because you are confronting power. And the right to information has become that kind of platform. So is the internet potentially so. But one needs to understand the power relationships, I think, much more. And the fact that like all technologies, this is a technology that can certainly enable, and we look at that a lot. But we don't look at so much how much it can exclude. And it does exclude. Just the use of technology while enabling is also excluding. And to me, UID is a prime example of that, where it is continuously talked about and propagated as a great way of including everyone, whereas on the ground we see that it actually controls and excludes. I don't have the time to go into it, but I really feel something like UID should have been properly looked at within this report, because there's a raging debate about it. It is not just a question of making something compulsory, it's a question of how machine technologies work, when they don't work, how your rights to food, to employment, to everything else can be excluded because whether it's your thumb impression or iris or anything else, it is all on a digital platform. It is the nature of the control of that platform, and it is how it works out. You're an old person trying to get your pension. The entire village is saying you are Ramlal. You are saying you are Ramlal. The person with the machine is saying you are Ramlal. But yet the machine says you are not Ramlal, and therefore you are excluded from that. And that is the way that it's put across. And that is your right to life, actually. Your pension of 500 rupees is being kept away. The entire Jan Dhan and banking platform is so dependent on digital platforms. And I think that there are many, many, many things that we call glitches. Today, if we say that these are the problems taking place in being able to really provide financial inclusion, we've done it in name, but in practice there are many glitches. People say, well, this is just a glitch, it will take 3 months, it will go. And that 3 months never comes. And that's the answer you keep getting. And people at the other end go through huge suffering because you make that the only platform. You don't think about your alternative platforms that exist. And those are also technologies. Also, in terms of digital inclusion, as people use more and more internet, I see it. Today I'm on a yatra with, actually I was abducted from that yatra to come to this meeting, and with 15 or 20 young people who are really good on digital platforms. They can do all the things that they need to do. And another 30 odd who have no clue about what it is, but they are trying to learn from those 15 or 20. There will always be that digital divide, just as there is a literacy divide. As more and more technologies come, it is that group of 15 or 20 who will make many more advances. And there are others who will be always fighting and running to catch up. So what is our platform that we are keeping open to everyone is something we need to think about. It's not that those remaining 30 are not learning. They are. They are desperately trying to learn. But will they ever learn as fast as or acquire the physical technologies, the machines that all of us manage to get access to? Because there is a connection between the program and the machine. There are fancier and fancier machines, faster and faster, more and more programs, all of them tie together, where poverty excludes, where your marginalization is further amplified because of what kind of access you have. So those are things. The third is that, again, if you look at the, I don't know how you pronounce it, Frank Laroux framework, in light of the RTI experience in India, and that's why, again, what Arvindji said about an Indian experience, I would probably disagree with him on many, many things about how state controls, and it's not just a question of BJP, it's BJP Congress. I think all these, the UID question remains the same, how digital policy is going on remains the same. It's, to me, how state controls power. Looking at the Frank Laroux framework in the Indian experience, again RTI, I think the two most powerful slogans of the RTI movement, which defined RTI in India, one was Hamara Paisa, Hamara Hisab. It was a straightforward understanding that people want a form of accountability, democratic accountability from government, of knowing whatever is done in their name. That kind of access, for instance, in NREGA, the digital platform has enabled access where everything is online in real time. But there has been no progress in terms of all other ministries being put online in the same way, that every single paisa that is spent. And what I'd like to say, Arvindji, is why can't we have oil and natural gas ministry, coal ministry, just like we have NREGA, every single paisa online for anyone to see. Just as we can see every laborer's list and how much time they've spent and what they've done. That's a very simple thing to do. If you can do it in NREG, you can do it everywhere else. And that is it's an idea of who can ask the question and who has to give the answer. Not just a question of the many other things that internet gives. And the other slogan was Hum janenge, hum jiyenge. It is a question of what exactly, where it is that my life connects with those questions of information. It is not just a question of freedom of expression, which we talk about here, but it is a question of, if I know what is in my ration shop, I can get my rations. If I know what is in the muster roll, I can get my wages. If I know what is in the hospital, I can get my medicines. And I cannot know it only online. Today, the difference between proactive disclosure online, so one step is to put it online, but is the biggest transformation made in Rajasthan is when summaries of that information were painted on the walls of the village. When you start putting it out in discussions in public audits and social audits, when you bring democracy, and India's strength is face-to-face democracy, when you bring that organized online information offline and make that connection, until then, you are not really, by just putting it on the net, it's not enough. Firstly, you're not putting it on the net. The second is you're not making those connections. The fourth thing I'd like to say is that if you look at the digital experience, MGNRAG, as I mentioned, has I think one of the world's best, still called management information system sites. Why we don't call MIS also a Janta information system, where people, what is it, how people want, we are still connected, government-wise, we are still organizing the internet so that a manager and a senior officer can get all the answers that they want to at the click of a button. Why can't people get all the information they want to at a click of a button in a way that they can understand it? Because internet can enable that. And to some extent, MGNREG has done it. If you look at the education, huge database on what's called DICE or UDICE, which is hundreds of fields updated, millions of rupees or billions of rupees spent all the time. It's completely useless. And what actually people use are monthly progress reports, the government people. And the worst example to me is UID. And the best way of looking at it is UID is really, and that's why, again, I think it should have been discussed. UID turns RTI on its head, to my mind. Because RTI is that the citizen should be able to access everything that the government is doing at all times. UID is that the government can access everything that the citizen is doing at all times. And that is one of the most dangerous things you can have. And it's just not just in terms of surveillance, it's also in terms of what today is public access information because it's painted on the walls. Tomorrow, because it will be accessed by UID and you will have to have a privacy foundation around UID, only those with exclusive access to information will get it. It's not in India, if you put in a privacy law, will you actually keep it away from companies or will you keep it away from powerful people? They will always get access to it. But you will keep it away from ordinary people by bringing in the privacy law. So it's something that I think the nature of the digital experience, who manages, who designs, and that famous line that's I think from your community that I find very useful, that architecture is policy and code is law. I know in NREG, again, despite its great things that the digital platform has done, I know that if it's written in that you cannot get 102 days of work, it's written that you can only get 100 days of work. After you have finished 94 days of work, you will not be able to put in your application for work because 7 plus 94 makes 101. So the computer has said that no more than 94 should be accepted. And that we've been at it for 2 years, 3 years. But yet people, if they do not complete 98, 99, 97 days or exactly 100 days, beyond 94 they will not get it because that's become the law. It's not there in the law, but the code has become the law. The architecture of NREG is more and more run by the architecture of the digital platform. And that's not there in the law. It's there in those who are designing how exactly they're going to transform the law into that platform. So the final point I'd like to make is that's why even access beyond 5 Mbps and whatever else that we are talking about, I think there, and all your recommendations here, I really think we need to learn from the Indian battle from the rights-based framework. We need to think about a right to internet law. We don't need to think about how many Mbps we give someone or not. We don't need to think about a policy and the nature of that. We need to think of the whole gamut of democracy, because that's what the rights-based framework has done. It's told us what transparency means, not what someone else thinks transparency is. It's told us what proactive disclosure means, and mandatory proactive disclosure means, not just what someone wants to dish out, which is almost an advertisement. It's told us what accountability means, and that currently on our accountability framework, defined by the citizen, not by someone else saying that this is what we are going to give you or not give you, but holding government to account within a framework of democracy. And therefore, internet also needs to be seen within that framework of democracy. And finally, it also is extremely important in seeing how we build that law in a participatory framework. Not just looking bit by bit at one aspect of the internet or the other aspects of the internet. And that comprehensive debate may take a long time. That will, I think, enable us, and I completely agree with Arvindji, that we are actually ruled by big international technology companies on the internet. And so within our domestic sphere, we don't want to restrict that, but we want to make sure that that does not restrict our country as a whole. And for that, we must have our laws that are enabling from a rights-based framework, not from some other framework of nationalism, but from a framework of the citizens of India being able to have unrestricted rights, unrestricted either by government or by companies, both of whom have huge capacities to restrict. And therefore, I think the Indian Constitution is a great framework within which we can look at where there can be certain restrictions placed, just as in Article 19(1)(a). I don't think one needs to go beyond what are considered reasonable restrictions there. I think those need to be made appropriate to the internet so that we see what can or should not come down, rather than government deciding what can be taken off, what can be blocked, what can be enabled. And therefore, the only way we'll be able to look at that comprehensive discussion, which is from the poorest person and their access to rights, to freedom of expression and democracy, which allows that access to rights. I think we should think about a law.